All right, so this next section that we're going over is now going to start with a little bit of graphing. We're going to need our graphing calculators out, so get those guys out. And we're going to be looking to analyze and identify the end behavior, zeros, minimum, and maximum values. And we're going to be using a table feature on the graphing calculator to analyze that. We're also going to be able to calculate using the graphing calculator what those zeros, maximums, minimums are. All right, so the first example, we're going to graph this function. So let's go over some of the knowledge that we had done in the previous section and just get some information out. Well, we see that the highest power is an odd number. So we have, this is an odd degree. We have a negative leading coefficient, so I'm going to say LC, which means if we think of the chart from last time, that means that we are going to be in the second quadrant and the fourth quadrant. So in terms of our end behavior, x is going to approach positive infinity as f of x approaches negative. So that's our fourth quadrant. And not only that, x is going to approach negative infinity as f of x approaches positive infinity. So there's quadrant 2. And its degree is 3, so we know we're going to have 3 zeros for this one. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to type this equation into our calculators. So we're going to go to y equals negative, which is at the bottom. We're going to type x, which is in the second column. And then in order to get the cubic function, we hit the math button, which is in the third, or in the first column, sorry, and it's number 3. So you should have negative x to the third, and then minus 4x, and there's a squared button on the calculator in the first column, plus 5. And then you're going to graph it. Now, if you do not see your graph, you can always hit zoom and then pick number 6 to get the standard picture of what it looks like, and it gives you a very clear graph of what you should see if it's in that particular window. So you're going to hit second graph. You're going to hit second graph to get a table of values because you want specific values to work with. And what you want are you want positive and you want negative values to go with. So I'm going to go all the way to negative 5. So I'm going to pick negative 5, negative 4, negative 3, negative 2, negative 1, 0, 1, and 2. So at negative 5, we get 30. At negative 4, we get 5. At negative 3, we get negative 4. At negative 2, we get negative 3. Negative 1. And all I'm doing right now is I'm just copying the values directly off of the chart on my calculator. I'm not calculating this stuff. The long way would be to plug it in, but you're never going to finish the material if you do it that way. So you're using the calculator to your advantage right now. And then that just gave us a decent amount of points that we can actually plot. So if I blow up the graph slightly, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And if I just now start to plot points, One, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 0. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I'm going to run out. I don't have enough. So then when I graph it, just like it shows on the calculator, I'm going to have this little curve going on here. Oh, geez. And it erased my thing. So let me draw it again. All right, there's our curve. Okay, so when it says to graph, you have the graphing calculator to help you. When it says to analyze, that's where all that information from last time comes in. What's the degree? What's the leading coefficient? What's the end behavior for both parts? And how many zeros you're going to have. So if the value of f of x, the y value, if it's going to change signs from 2 consecutive x values, then we know that there's going to be a 0 that's going to occur between those 2 values. So if we look, basically, if I recopy, so I'm going to say see the chart above, but what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to recopy part of it. So I have x's and I have y's, and I'm going to focus on where it says negative 4, 5, and negative 3, negative 4. Okay? So if we look at this chart, it's not the x value, but we have consecutive x values, so we're good. But if you look at the y values, we are going from a positive to a negative. So we have a sign change. So whenever you have a sign change, you ask yourself, well, what number has to fall between both a positive and a negative? That has to be 0. So there is a sign change, so a 0 exists between the two values. So that means that this graph, between the x value of -4 and -3, it somewhere crosses the x-axis and it makes a 0 y value, which you can actually see right here. So this would be that 0 that we are talking about right here. Okay, but we're going to go over a way that we can actually calculate what that is if it's not going to be a perfect number. So the other thing that we're going to calculate is a relative max and min. So a max is the high point in a graph, and a min would be a low point in the graph. Okay, and you can tell that based off the picture itself. Now, for a polynomial function of a degree n, it has at most n minus 1 turning points. So example 1, the degree was 3, so n was 3, which means 3 minus 1 is 2, and it turned 2 times, which it did, because you had a minimum, which is here, and then you had a maximum, which is right here. A minimum is, think of it like a valley in a graph, and a maximum is like a hill. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the graphing calculator to find the relative max and min and zeros for this particular function. So again, it's the same function we had above, so you shouldn't be typing anything new in. What you're going to hit now is get back to the graph. So you can just hit zoom 6 just so you get back to the actual graph itself and you can see it. And you're going to say, all right, well, I want to calculate, let's say I want to calculate my max. So what we're going to type in is we're going to hit the second button, and then calc. So second calc, and you see number 2 is for the zeros, number 3 is for the minimum, number 4 is for the maximum. So let's say we want to do maximum first. So let's go down to number 4 and hit enter. So it already puts me on that topmost point, and you see the words left bound on the bottom left screen of the calculator. So what you're going to do is with your arrows on the calculator, move your cursor so you're to the left of that point. Doesn't have to be super far, but you just don't want to be at the same point it started you at. So just bump it maybe 1 or 2 places to the left, and you're going to hit enter. Now it says right bound, so you're going to, again, move your cursor, go up the hill, and then you want to make sure you're on the right of that point. Doesn't matter how far, just don't be super far away, and you hit enter. And then you see the word guess. Well, we're not guessing here, so you got to hit enter one more time. And then a value should pop up on the calculator. That gives you a maximum value. Now, I have mine in scientific notation. It says negative 1.269 e to the negative 6. If you have something that's to that many negative 6, that means it's 0. So the maximum has a 0 x value and a 5 for the y value. And that's your maximum. So now let's do minimum. So we're going to do second trace and pick number 3 this time for minimum. And now the cursor is going to leave you in the same spot. So you got to drag that cursor all the way down to that valley. And you want to be left of that lowest point there and hit enter. Then you move the cursor to the right of that point and you hit enter. And then it says guess. You don't want the guess, so you got to hit enter one more time. And you're going to get decimals. So we're going to round to 2 places. So it should be in the ballpark of negative 2.67, comma, negative 4.48 for that minimum value. All right. And now in terms of zeros, if we hit zoom 6 again to see what the graph looks like, that's how many times it crosses the x-axis. In this case, it crosses 3 times. So we got to do one at a time. So we're going to hit second calc again. We're going to hit number 2 for the 0. And then what I would suggest is I would go all the way to the left first. So just pick one direction, left or right or left. Doesn't matter though. And you're still given directional wise the same thing. So left bound and right bound. So make sure wherever 0 you're starting with, make sure you're to the left of it on a graph. If you're reading from left to right, hit enter, and then you move your cursor to the right of it to get right bound, and then you hit one more for the guess because we don't want the guess, And my furthest to the left value, if you did that first, should be about negative 3.62, comma 0. So actually, I'm going to write it as x equals negative 3.62 instead of a point for that one. So there's my first one. So now I'm going to hit second, calculate again, number 2, and I'm moving on to the middle 0. So you're following the graph. Now we want to be to the left of that value. Move your cursor to the right. We don't want the guess. And I get about negative 1.38 when I round. Now I've got one more. So I go second, calculate, number 2. Move my cursor to the right. I need to be left of that last point. I need to be right of that last point. And that final value actually comes out to being a beautiful number, which is number 1. So there were 3 zeros for this one. And we got a maximum and we have a minimum value. And it's all done on the calculator. Okay? It's just whether you're picking number 2 for the 0, number 3 for the minimum, or number 4 for the maximum. But you do one at a time. All right, 2 more problems putting it all together here. All right, so it says we're going to graph the equation, provide a table of values, find the real zeros, and again, this is all being done on the calculator. So step 1, you got to type it in correctly. So now with x to the 4th, you probably are going to have to use that caret button in parentheses. So just be careful with that. And then just remember x to the 3rd is under the math button. So we type it in, and you hit zoom 6 so we have something to look at. Now I'm going to set up for my table, and I'm going to go second graph for my table of values. And again, you just need some value. So I would pick at least 6 points, I would say. So I'm going to stick at negative 2, negative 1, 0, 1, 2, and 3. And I'm just going to copy the values down. And again, I'm taking this directly off of the calculator. I am not calculating these myself. And I get my values. So now, graph the equation, provide a table of values. So now what I'm going to do is plot some points. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, negative 1, negative 1, 0, 1, 1, negative 3, 4, 5, 7. And what you see is it gives a very similar shape to the last one that we just went over. Okay. At any point, again, pause the video if you have to do it a little bit slower. That's perfectly fine, but I want to make sure you get it. So we're going to find zeros. So you ask yourself, okay, according to this graph, how many times does this graph hit? Oops, I forgot one loop here. My bad. It actually comes up. So where are we? 2 there, and then it comes up. Oop, still on that. Sorry about that. It comes here, and then it comes back up. Okay, so there's actually, how many zeros are we looking for? 1, 2, 3, and 4. So we're looking for 4 zeros. So that's 4 things you're going to do on the calculator. So you hit second, calculate, number 2. You're going to move your cursor to the left. You're going to move your cursor to the right. So pause the video so that you have time to figure out each one of these. And I'm just going to list these 4 out for you so you can see what you should be ending up with when you do that. All right, and then you're going to do the same thing for a maximum and for a minimum. So the maximum in your graph is right here. The minimum in your graph is right here. And you're going to hit the same buttons. Actually, there's 2 minimums, so let's get that guy out of there. There's also a minimum here. So max, again, pause the video so you can go back and actually get these values. You want to make sure that you're comfortable doing it on your own. I'm just giving you final answers here. All right, and then the last part is the domain and range. So the domain, remember, when we talk about this, it's what x values apply. It's always going to be all reals, so negative infinity to positive infinity. With the range, though, what you're doing is you're going to take the lowest possible value that you got, and that's your minimum value. So out of these 2 minimum values, the second one has a lower y value. That lowest y value is going to start your interval for your range. And then you're going to go up to positive infinity for that. Okay, so again, there's a lot of information in these. What I want you to do is I'm going to write the answers down for the next one, but pause the video at this point, and I want you to do this second one all on your own. And then come back and double check with what I have on here.